Sophia Reyes clutched her worn leather bag against her chest, her heart pounding as she rushed through the grand lobby of Everett & Co. The pristine marble floors gleamed under the morning light, making her feel even more out of place in this world of polished success. 12 minutes until the interview. She needed this job more than anything. Well, almost anything. One thing still topped the list: Leo's smile. The way his eyes lit up every morning, the pure joy in his laughter. It was the reason she pushed forward, no matter how exhausted she was. The thought of her son's bright, gap-toothed grin this morning as she dropped him off at Mrs. Dawson's apartment gave her strength. "Be good today, buddy, and I'll make dinosaur pancakes for dinner," she had promised, even though her kitchen held nothing but a handful of flour and a single egg. The elevator doors finally slid open, and Sophia darted inside, pressing the button for the 40th floor. Just as the doors were about to close, a hand shot through the gap. The doors reversed, revealing a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit, sharp green eyes, a knowing smile. "Thanks for holding it," he said, though she hadn't. Sophia managed a nod, trying to focus on reviewing her interview responses, but then the elevator shuddered and came to an abrupt halt. Her stomach dropped. "No, not now." "It's okay," the man said calmly. "These things usually get fixed pretty quickly." She exhaled shakily. "I have an interview, a really important one." He studied her for a moment before asking, "What position?" Sophia hesitated for a moment before answering, "Executive assistant to the marketing director." The man nodded, leaning casually against the elevator wall, completely at ease despite the unexpected situation. "Is the job important to you?" Sophia tightened her grip on her bag. "More than anything, it could change my life, and my son's." For the first time, something flickered in his sharp green eyes. "You have a son?" She nodded. Almost instinctively, she pulled out her phone and showed him her lock screen. A 4-year-old boy with bright eyes and a mischievous grin. "Leo, he's my whole world." The man stared at the photo longer than necessary. Something unreadable crossed his face. Pain, maybe? But before she could analyze it, the elevator gave a slight jolt and started moving again. She let out a breath of relief, but her stomach was still in knots. She was late. "What floor?" he asked. 40. Something shifted in his expression. Amusement? Surprise? But before she could dwell on it, the doors slid open. "Good luck, Sophia," he said, his voice warm. She froze. I'd never told him my name. Had she? A shiver ran down her spine, not out of fear, but curiosity. Who exactly was this man? Before she could ask, the doors closed. "Sophia Reyes?" a voice called out. She turned. The receptionist smiled. "Right this way. Mr. Everett is expecting you." She frowned. "I was scheduled to interview with Ms. Clarkson. There's been a slight change. Daniel Everett, our CEO, has requested to interview you personally." Sophia's breath caught. The CEO? But why? Then it hit her. Everett. Daniel. The man from the elevator. She stepped into the grand office, her heart pounding. Daniel Everett stood near his desk, watching her with quiet amusement, but beneath the smirk was something else, genuine interest. "Shall we begin our second interview?" he asked smoothly. Sophia took a deep breath, trying to steady herself as she stepped into the spacious office. The air felt heavier, or maybe it was just the way Daniel Everett was watching her so intently. "I have to admit, you made quite an impression on me in that elevator," he said, arms crossed. Sophia sat down, keeping her posture professional. "I hope it was a good impression." Daniel smirked. "More than you know." The interview was nothing like what she had prepared for. Instead of technical questions, Daniel focused on how she thought, how she handled adversity. By the time their conversation ended, Sophia knew one thing for certain. She was no longer applying for the executive assistant position. "I'd like to offer you a different role," Daniel said, his gaze sharp yet surprisingly warm. "Chief of staff." Sophia blinked. But I don't have experience in a position that high." "But you have something more valuable. Determination and adaptability. I don't need someone to just follow orders. I need someone who can stand beside me." The salary was 3 times what she had originally applied for. Leo would never have to struggle again. She swallowed hard. "I need some time to think about it." Daniel nodded. "Of course. But I have a feeling you'll say yes." The next few days flew by in a blur. Sophia started her new role, working directly with Daniel every day. He was a demanding boss, but fair and incredibly sharp. And most surprisingly, Daniel began taking an interest in Leo in ways she never expected. One evening, as she was reviewing documents, Daniel casually placed something on her desk, a children's book about dinosaurs. For Leo. "I heard he likes dinosaurs," he said simply. Sophia looked up at him, her heart stirring in a way she hadn't expected. Daniel Everett, the most powerful man in the company, was paying attention to her son. Sophia couldn't deny it. Daniel Everett wasn't just a skilled CEO. He was a man who pursued what he wanted with quiet persistence. And right now, it seemed like what he wanted was her. Ever since he gave Leo the dinosaur book, Daniel had been finding ways to weave himself into her life. "Lunch today?" he asked one morning while she was reviewing reports. Sophia glanced at her packed schedule. "I have a lot to get through." Daniel raised an eyebrow. That sounded like a polite rejection. She pressed her lips together, suppressing a smile. Slowly, Daniel became an undeniable presence in her daily routine. He memorized her favorite coffee order and brought it to her on busy mornings. On late nights at the office, he always made sure she wasn't overworking herself. Whenever she mentioned Leo, he paid attention to the smallest details. Then one day, he asked if he could meet Leo. "I'd like to give him something myself," he said, holding up a handcrafted wooden dinosaur model. Sophia hesitated. Letting Leo get close to someone like Daniel, wealthy, powerful, and from a completely different world, was that really a good idea? But Leo had no hesitation at all. "You're the one who gave me the dinosaur book?" The boy's eyes widened when they met Daniel one late afternoon. Daniel smiled, crouching down to Leo's height. "That's right. And here's a new friend for your collection." Leo gasped in delight, hugging the gift tightly. Sophia watched in silence. Daniel Everett, one of the most powerful men she knew, was sitting there, patiently listening to a 4-year-old excitedly ramble about dinosaurs. Her chest tightened. She was losing control over her emotions. Sophia had always been good at keeping her emotions in check, but Daniel Everett was making it impossible. He wasn't just showing interest in her, he was building a real connection with Leo. On weekend afternoons, if Sophia and Leo happened to stop by the cafe near their apartment, Daniel always coincidentally showed up with a book or a new dinosaur toy. "Mr. Daniel!" Leo exclaimed one day, running up to him excitedly. Daniel smiled, crouching down to hand him a box of colored pencils. "Last time, you said you liked drawing dinosaurs. I thought you might enjoy these." Sophia watched, her heart twisting. She was afraid that if she let Daniel in too much, one day he would leave. She had seen it happen before. Leo's father had walked away the moment he learned she was pregnant. Daniel wasn't that kind of man. But could she trust him? Late one evening at the office, when they were the only two left, Daniel's voice broke the silence. "Sophia, I don't want to just be your boss." Her chest tightened. "I know," she whispered, but she couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. "Then why do you keep pushing me away?" She inhaled deeply. "Because I can't risk everything, Leo, this job, my life, just for feelings that might not last." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I'm not the kind of man who gives up easily, Sophia," he said, his voice low but resolute. She swallowed hard, knowing her battle against her own feelings was slowly slipping from her grasp. Sophia had spent her whole life being practical and cautious, but Daniel was making her want to believe in something more. A chance, a future she had never dared to dream of. 3 days after their conversation, Sophia came home late after a long day. As she stepped inside, she saw Leo sitting at the kitchen table, scribbling on a piece of paper. "Mommy, where's Mr. Daniel?" She froze. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" Leo looked up, holding out his drawing. A man with bright green eyes and a warm smile, standing next to a smaller boy holding a dinosaur. I think he's like the hero in the stories you read to me, the one who always shows up at the right time." Sophia's chest tightened. Leo had grown attached to Daniel more than she had realized. That night, Sophia made a decision. The next morning, she walked into Daniel's office, her nerves steady but her heart racing. He looked up from his desk, surprise flickering in his gaze. "Sophia?" She took a deep breath. "Are you free? I'd like to take you to dinner." Daniel blinked, and then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "Finally!" Sophia let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "Are you always this persistent?" Daniel stood, grabbing his jacket. "With you? Always." For the first time in a long time, Sophia felt like her life was about to take a beautiful turn. Dinner was in a small, cozy restaurant. Daniel didn't bring up work, not once. Instead, he spent the evening listening to Sophia talk about Leo, about the times he made a mess of their living room just to build his own dinosaur world. "Can you meet Leo this weekend?" Sophia asked hesitantly. Daniel seemed momentarily surprised, but then his expression softened. "I'd love to." That Saturday, when Daniel arrived at her apartment, Leo was already waiting at the door, clutching a toy dinosaur in his small hands. "Mr. Daniel," Leo shouted, running up and hugging his leg. Daniel laughed, crouching down to lift the boy into his arms. "Ready for a dinosaur adventure today?" Sophia watched them, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wasn't just about finding love. It was about knowing that for the first time in a long time, she and Leo weren't alone anymore. She had once believed she couldn't have a complete family. But maybe happiness wasn't something she had to carry alone. It was something she could share. Leo glanced at his mother, then tugged on Daniel's hand. "Mommy smiles differently when you're here." Sophia laughed, reaching for Daniel's hand. "Then I guess I should get used to smiling like this more often." Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his eyes filled with promise. "I'll make sure of it." Sophia leaned against the railing, her eyes tracing the city lights twinkling below. The night breeze was cool against her skin, soothing after a long day. Daniel stepped beside her, placing 2 glasses of wine on a small table before turning his gaze to her. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. Sophia turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Regret what?" Daniel gave her a small smile. "Letting me into your life. Letting yourself love me." She was quiet for a moment before shaking her head. "No, but it scares me." Daniel tilted his head, his emerald eyes darkening. "What are you afraid of?" She took a deep breath, finally voicing the fear that had lived inside her for so long. "That one day you'll realize I don't belong in your world. That I can't give you everything you deserve. But mostly that Leo will get attached to you and one day lose you." Daniel was silent for a moment before he reached for her hand. "I was afraid too," he admitted, his voice gentle. Sophia looked at him, surprised. "I lost Charlotte," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought my heart wouldn't be able to love again, but then you walked into my life, you and Leo, and I realized I don't just want to love you, I want to love your son as if he were my own." Her heart clenched. "I'm not going anywhere, Sophia," Daniel whispered, his gaze unwavering. Sophia couldn't hold back anymore. She stepped closer, their eyes locked in the quiet night air. Daniel lifted a hand, gently brushing his fingers along her cheek before leaning in, capturing her lips in a slow, lingering kiss. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was a promise, a silent vow, everything they had been searching for and had finally found in each other. Under the stars, Sophia knew, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid anymore. One weekend afternoon, Leo ran excitedly into the kitchen, where Sophia was making dinner. "Mommy, Mr. Daniel needs my help with something super important." Sophia laughed, wiping her hands before crouching down. "And what's this important mission about?" Leo grinned mischievously. "It's a secret, but you have to come to the park with me." When Sophia and Leo arrived at the park, Daniel was already waiting, standing next to a small table draped with a white cloth. "Hello, you two," Daniel greeted them, but there was something nervous in his usually confident eyes. Leo ran to the table and grabbed a small box, holding it out to his mother. "Open it, Mommy." Sophia glanced at Daniel, confused, before carefully opening the box. Inside was a sparkling ring and a handwritten note scrawled in a familiar, childish handwriting. "Mommy, will you marry Mr. Daniel, Leo?" A laugh bubbled up in her throat, but so did tears. She looked up to find Daniel kneeling in front of her. "I know you like to be cautious, but sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them. Let me and Leo be your family, forever." Sophia glanced at her son. Leo nodded enthusiastically. She laughed through her tears. "Yes." Daniel exhaled in relief, sliding the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms. Leo cheered. "I told you, Mr. Daniel is our hero." 3 months later, Sophia walked down the aisle, her white dress flowing like a dream. Her hands trembled slightly as she held onto Daniel's, but his reassuring smile melted every doubt away. The venue was beautifully decorated, but nothing shone brighter than the love in his eyes. Leo, proudly holding the wedding rings, stood between them, beaming. As Daniel placed the ring on Sophia's finger, the little boy squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Daniel," Leo whispered sincerely, "for becoming my second dad." Daniel crouched down, pressing a kiss to the boy's forehead. "Thank you, kiddo, for letting me love both of you." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel pulled Sophia into a deep kiss as cheers erupted around them. Leo jumped up excitedly. "Now I have a complete family," Leo declared, beaming up at them. Sophia let out a soft laugh, tears glistening in her eyes. Daniel knelt down, pulling Leo into a warm embrace before glancing at Sophia with unspoken emotion. In that moment, no words were needed. They both knew this was forever. Sophia squeezed Daniel's hand, knowing that this was the happiest moment of her life.